Hey, welcome to my video course on 100 ways to see someone might be attracted to you. Now, before I get to the 100 different points, I'm first going to go through some information that's going to allow you to be able to use this information better, and just some other points around the side that you need to fully make sense of it. Point one is the most important thing in body language, but also applies to any time you're looking for clues of something that someone might be hiding, or maybe they're not hiding it, but they're just not showing it for some reason. And one of those, quite commonly, is if someone is attracted to you or not. So what you want to do is look for a cluster of a few signals that point to the same thing. So in body language, we can sometimes get signals that can mean opposite things. So for example, someone who is looking at you and when you catch them and they look away fast can be a sign that they're attracted to you, but it can also be a sign that they don't like you. So in that case, we want to look for more evidence. If we get two more signs that they're attracted to you, that's pretty good evidence that they're attracted to you now. So this is the main rule here. A good number is 3, but ideally we just want to look for a number of signals pointing to the same thing. Social skills doesn't really use numbers too much, but numbers can be good as guidelines to start with to get more of an understanding initially. Remember, we're basically never going to be 100% sure of anything about anyone. So even if we've got tons of evidence, there's still a chance that it might not be the case. So what you want to do is not try to be a perfectionist. Perfectionists end up always doing worse in social situations. That's one reason of many why the person who's more of a stereotypical nerd ends up doing worse in social situations despite usually being more intelligent, because they're focused on being perfect slow rather than okay fast. Social skills massively favours the person who's fast rather than perfect. So if you're pretty sure about something, 90% plus, then I'd recommend we just assume that that's the case and run with it. And you're going to be better off over the course of 100 different situations by sticking to that way of thinking. Remember, all of these signs here that you can read from someone else to see if they might be attracted to you, you can also do yourself to show that you're attracted to someone. So they work both ways. If you're not sure if someone's attracted to you or not, my recommendation in nearly every scenario, 99% plus of scenarios, that you just assume that they are attracted to you and you run with it with confidence. A lot of the time, someone's not going to be sure. If you're not sure if they're attracted to you, it might be because they're not sure of themselves. So if you use confidence and you just assume and act like they are attracted to you, then a lot of the time that confidence is going to sway them towards being more attracted to you. Confidence is one of the most attractive things, regardless of your sexuality or sex or gender. Also, this applies to any other time in social situations where you're not sure if something's positive or negative. So for example, outside of attraction and flirting, if you're not sure if someone is meaning to be rude to you or they're joking, assume that they're just joking and run with it with confidence. And a lot of the time it can steer someone who's undecided. For example, some people might be testing if they can be nasty to you, or even doing that without even knowing that they're doing it. They've just made it into a habit. So by doing that, you often push things towards the side that's the positive one. And additionally, I always say managing your emotions is the most important thing in social skills. So by doing this, you end up having more positive emotions, which helps you do better in social skills. So I'm going to give you a load of different signals to read if someone might potentially be attracted to you, and go through a bit in how to sort of get a cluster of evidence to make a conclusion. However, remember that if you're trying to read something from someone, especially if you're not talking to them much, like across the room, say in a classroom or at your job or something like that, remember to always have the option there that you can go talk to them and ask. Maybe not directly ask, sometimes maybe directly ask, but maybe just start a conversation, and you can get way more information by speaking to someone than from trying to read times when they look at you and stuff like that. If you're too shy or you have some kind of other emotion blocking you from doing that, I'd highly recommend that you work on overcoming that. The fastest way to improve in social skills is if you have something that you want to do, or that you know you don't have a good excuse logically not to do, like talk to the person who you like, who's been looking at you. There's no logical reason not to do that in most situations. If you can get past that emotion that's stopping you and go and do the action, you gain 100 times more experience points than you do in other parts of social skills. And bear in mind, if you want to learn more about how to start conversations and grow them, we've got a course that goes through all of my stuff on how to not run out of things to say in conversation, simultaneously make your conversations more engaging for everyone, including for yourself, and also how to overcome nervousness in social situations. It's bigger than this one. It's about 4 hours long, split into sections, so you don't have to study it all in one go. If you run out of things to say in conversation, or you want to learn how to start conversations with people, have more interesting conversations, or overcome nervousness, I'd highly recommend checking it out afterwards. In terms of going and talking to someone, one of the main reasons why people don't do this, and they'd rather get as much information as possible to make sure it's safe first, or even have the other person approach them first, is because they're worried about rejection. So the vast majority of the time, for the vast majority of people, rejection is way less of a big deal than people think it is. If you actually push yourself to go through rejection a bunch of times, you can start to see that it's really not a big deal. People tend to estimate that it's going to hurt them and cause them damage of various kinds about 100 times more than exists in actual reality. And if you're scared of rejection, I'd recommend that you spend some time, ideally, going out one time and just putting yourself in situations where you're likely to get rejected, just so that you can get used to it and see that it's not a big deal. Most people are nice about it as well when they reject people. They tend to be polite and try to make it comfortable for the other person. Most people are, on average, more good than they are bad. So one way that you can use these signals more effectively to read people is, does their signal that they're giving exist when they interact with other people also? Or does it exist to a more or lesser extent? So for example, one of them might be touching their hair as they're talking, right? So someone who does that to everyone they speak to, that's not as much of a strong signal if they're doing it to you, as it would be if they only do it to you. Also, we want to check, does it differ to their baseline? So if someone has suddenly changed their behavior, then it's also more of a strong indicator. And this applies to other times when you're reading people as well, whether it's reading whether someone's lying or has a certain emotion or intention or something like that. See, does it change between different people? Do they commonly show this gesture to most people or everyone? And have they changed their behavior based off of something happening, or you turning up, or you doing something that might have changed their behavior? If you do something that comes across as you think might come across as attractive, you show some confidence or did something impressive, and suddenly they're showing one of these signals, it's quite good evidence that they're showing attraction to you. If they don't show one of these signals hardly at all and they do it to you, again, quite good evidence. So remember that lots of these signals are also signs of friendship. So some of them are more directly attractiveness, right? So the most glaringly obvious one would be if someone says, I am attracted to you, and you don't think that they're taking the piss or joking or something. So that's a strong sign of attraction. But something else like strong eye contact can be a sign that they're friends with you as well, rather than attracted. However, if you get a bunch of signals that show friendship, and it's in a context where it's likely that there might be flirting involved, so they're around your age, they're the opposite sex if you're both straight or something like that, then you can start to see it as building up some evidence that they are attracted to you. And remember, like I said, if you're not sure, most of the time it's better if you just assume that they are and run with it. And then if you try to escalate things and maybe like get their number, ask them out on a date or something like that, if they're not attracted and your reading is wrong, then they're probably going to make it clear to you at some point as you start requesting them to engage more, to meet up with you outside of wherever you meet on their own or something like that. Another thing to look out for is, does the signal repeat? So if they have one of these signals, but it's one of the weaker ones, but they're constantly repeating it every time they're speaking to you or interacting with you, then it starts to mount up as evidence. And if it happens just as a one-off, then it's somewhat likely that it might have been due to something else or a coincidence or something like that. So as well as checking, does it differ to their baseline behavior? Does it differ between other people they're speaking to? Do they generally show it? Has something happened in the environment or in the interaction with you that may have changed their emotions? We also want to look at how often is this signal repeated. Additionally, remember that even if they're attracted to you, even if they're strongly attracted to you, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're guaranteed not to reject you or guaranteed to approach you. They still might not approach you. They might be nervous or shy, or there might be some other reason why they won't, and they still might reject you. Maybe they've got a boyfriend or girlfriend or something, or maybe there's some other reason where they feel like that you can't be together, or perhaps even they just get nervous and say no just out of their own nervousness. So Just even if you read that they're attracted to you, if they've then rejected you, that doesn't necessarily mean they weren't attracted to you and you got it wrong. They might still be attracted to you, but rejecting you for some other reason. Or they might be attracted to you, but not going over and talking to you for some other reason. In that case, usually nervousness. And my final point here is remember that humans emit emotions as energy. This is the point where some people start screaming at the screen, but this is already established science. So if you look up the human heart's magnetic field, since around 1960 something, it's been shown that we have a magnetic field that extends from our heart outside of our body, quite a large distance outside of our body. We have the same genes that birds do that can sense magnetic fields. And the magnetic field changes in size, in my opinion, also in terms of how it's composed, but definitely in size based on your emotions. So with these 3 pieces of information from already established science, it's quite logical to conclude we can directly feel each other's emotions. Tons of people report this. Tons of people report being empaths, or being able to feel someone's emotions, or being able to feel someone's nearby without noticing they're there with their eyes or their ears or anything. So remember that's the case. That's also a big reason why managing your emotions is so important in social skills, and in my opinion, by far the most important thing, because it gets immediately ejected as energy and people can feel it. Most of the time this gets passed off as subconscious body language reading. The mainstream seems to not want people to really know about this for some reason, but that's what happens, okay? So as well as all of this, if you pick up a feeling from someone, especially if you're close to them in terms of distance, then don't just dismiss it as your brain making something up. It's a valid sense that you should pay attention to and also see as evidence. Okay, so now I'm going to start to go through all 100 of these points, okay? So I'm also going to have a nice trendy graphic of 5 hearts that will exist from either 1 to 5, in the same way that we review things on the internet with stars, in terms of how strong they are, okay? So 1 heart doesn't mean that it's a rubbish signal that you shouldn't think about. It's still a sign they might be attracted to. It's just not as much strong evidence as a 4, for example. If it's a 5, then we might even go as far as concluding on its own that that's a sign they're attracted to you, but you do want to kind of look for a cluster. If you're looking for a number as a guideline for now, then I'd probably recommend somewhere between 5 and 10 hearts total. We can start to make a conclusion that they're attracted to you. Just one more point. If you've been speaking to them for years and years, remember they're obviously going to end up doing some of these things at some point. So another factor to take into account, if you've just met them and they're showing these signs, that's stronger evidence than if you've known them for a year and they've shown like 4 signs in that whole year, then that's obviously weaker evidence, despite it matching up with my recommendation of when you should consider it conclusive evidence. And one more thing, remember after this, if you want to learn how to never run out of things to say in conversation, make your conversations more engaging for everyone, including yourself, and overcome nervousness in social situations, then I'd recommend that you check out our video course on that. And if you have one of those issues, it will definitely solve it for you as long as you follow what the course says. So check it out after. Here's the 100 signals. Signal 1 is they reinitiate conversation if you stop talking, either replies by text or in real life. So you're talking, they're talking, the conversation stops, and then they restart the conversation, especially if they're asking questions. Number 2, they give you some kind of nickname, or they at least attempt to give you some kind of nickname, or they ask if you already have a nickname. This can also be a good tool for flirting for yourself as well. If you can make up a funny nickname or something like that, it tends to be quite powerful to do. Number 3, they mention your boyfriend or girlfriend without knowing if you have one. So they might say something like, what would your girlfriend say about this? Or what does your boyfriend think of that thing that you do? If they do this, then it's usually a sign they're trying to figure out if you have one without being direct about it. And if they're trying to figure out if you're single or not, it's quite simple to understand how that's a potential sign that they're attracted to you. Number 4, if they do something noticeable, usually something that they might consider was impressive, or on the other side of the spectrum, something that they consider was embarrassing. So if they fell over, or they did some cool dance or something along those lines, and then they immediately, or pretty much immediately, look to see what your reaction is, especially if they could have chosen someone else to look at. If they're looking specifically for your reaction, then that's quite a strong sign. Number 5, on their way out, they ask you where you're going. If they do this, then obviously they are interested in where you're going. They might want you to ask them to come with them. So If you want to spend more time with them or build some connection or flirt or something like that, I'd recommend we invite them to where you're going, obviously, if you can do that. So say you're out clubbing or something, you're just going from one place to another, that's a good time to invite them. If not, you can grab their contact details at this point. It tends to be an easy point to do that. Or you can do both. To get to a more advanced level in social skills, you always want to look for ways to complete multiple objectives in one step. So this is one example when you can do that. Number 6, they move location with you. So say you're sitting in one part of a room and you move to another part of a room, they either ask if they can come with you or they just go with you. Or if they're more subtle about it, or perhaps some other reason, usually they're trying to be subtle, you move and then a little while after, they move to make it less obvious that they've done that. So just be aware of this. You can even use this as a test sometimes. So you can just move to then see if they follow. Bear in mind though, some people who are a bit more insecure, or depending on how you do it or the context of the situation, might see that as a rejection. So as always with body language and stuff, if you do something that might show something that you don't want, you can do the opposite. So say for example, you're slouching in your chair like this, just because it's comfortable, or you want to show confidence or something, but you don't want to look rude, like you're not interesting, you can balance it with good eye contact and nodding your head while they're talking, just as an example. So in this example, if you're moving away as a test, you can smile at them as you leave, or something similar. Number 7, they remember details about you. So this might be something along the lines of your birthday, or a specific story that you said a while back, or something that you said in a conversation a while ago. If they're remembering details about you, then that's a good sign they might be attracted to you. If they don't remember one detail, don't see this as a sign that they don't care about you. Always look for multiple clues, right? So if they're consistently doing that, yeah, fair enough. If they didn't one time, maybe they got distracted or something, maybe they have ADHD, or maybe they just forgot that one time. So check to see if they generally remember details or they generally do not. Number 8, they make sexual innuendos. So I can't remember the dictionary definition off by heart, but it's usually something along the lines of you twist something innocent to make it sexual in order to flirt with someone. For example, you're talking about iced lolly flavors and you're a guy and you say to them, I reckon that at night time you might like the banana flavor, and you give like a flirtatious smile, obviously referring to certain organ. They've got a cat and you say, nice pussy, can I pet it? They read Charles Dickens, the author, who lots of people probably learn about in school, and you can say to them, yeah, I bet you like to have a bit of dick, don't you? So obviously lots of people might see these as a bit crude, right? So they can range from more innocent to like more glaringly obvious, but it's a sign that they're flirting with you. I'd recommend getting good at creating these, and even if you don't like them, to practice situations where you can create them, or think of times when you can, just to improve your sharpness and your level of flirting. It tends to be a pretty effective tool because you can pass it off as a joke. So then if they don't really like it too much, then it's not really possible to properly reject you, which at a more advanced stage of flirting is one of the main things you want to be able to do. Number 9, if you move closer to them, they don't pull away from you. So bear in mind, people have different like personal space distances. For someone that you don't know, it's usually like a meter or 2, which I think is the distance of both your heart's magnetic fields, as I mentioned at the start. The second zone tends to be, can you reach them with your arms or not? For obvious reasons, for safety and stuff, people think of that instinctually. So if you start to move into that zone, or perhaps if you're already in that zone, you move into a bit of a closer zone where you could end up kissing or something, and they don't move away, then that's a good sign that they're attracted to you. If they do, as long as you didn't move too much too soon, people aren't really going to see it as creepy or anything. They're just going to move back. Number 10, if you didn't reply to their text, or if a text conversation ended, they text again, especially if you didn't reply. So if they say something to you, like a question, and especially if you opened it, but even not necessarily if you opened it, and then you don't respond, and then they message you again, that's a good sign that they're attracted to you. Number 11, they touch you. Usually it's they're talking, or it might be that they are in a position where you're constantly touching. So maybe you're in a more crowded environment where you're sat side by side and your legs are touching. Especially if they're doing something like touching you on the arm as they're talking, something like that, and especially if they need to lean forwards to do it, then this is a stronger sign. Generally, it's a strong sign they're attracted to you if they're trying to touch you. Number 12, they highlight something that you have in common. So you mention something that you do, or you have some involvement or prior experience with, and they also mention, oh yeah, me too, and then they cite something and reference something from their past or what they do currently, but how they're also involved in this. So it might be a hobby, like, I don't know, football or something like that, or they like reading or something along those lines. If you're subscribed to our email list, we send out exercises that you can practice, and one of them includes practicing being able to highlight commonalities with people. Number 13, they glance at you repeatedly if you're nearby. So if you're in a situation where it's a fairly big group, or you're in a situation that's like similar to a classroom, or you're at like an office or whatever, and they're glancing at you, especially if they need to turn their head or their eyes more, then this is quite a good sign that they're attracted to you. Number 14, they touch their hair while they're talking to you, especially if they're twirling their hair. Obviously I can't do this really, my hair's not long enough. So it's more of a female signal, this one, or more accurately, it's more of a feminine signal. So a lot of these flirting signals, most of them are kind of irrelevant, like what kind of gender or sex you are or whatever. But some of them are more masculine oriented and some of them are more feminine oriented. Obviously we can have people who are male but have more of a feminine personality and vice versa. So you'll be able to see these signals more in usually girls, because girls tend to be more feminine, but just generally more feminine people, and there's some that are more masculine oriented. Hair touching is one that's more feminine oriented. So it's either when they're talking to you, or if they notice you from nearby. So say you just walk into a room or you've been there for a while and they just see you, and then they just start touching their hair. Then that's a fairly good signal they're attracted to you. 15, if eye contact happens from a distance, they hold it for a while rather than try and look away straight away. So you're looking around the room, you end up having eye contact, either purposely or not, and instead of looking away straight away, they hold it for a while. This one's pretty important to see what their baseline usually is. Some people tend to be someone who holds eye contact more with strangers. Some people are nervous and they look away. So if it's different to their norm, then that's quite important to reading this signal. Number 16, they smile at you while you're talking or when they see you. Number 17, they have consistent, fast responses by text. So obviously there's going to be some people out there who respond quickly all the time. If you're that person, then I'd recommend bearing in mind that there's a lot of people who are going to see that as you're showing interest towards them, which you may or may not want to happen. It's not necessarily a bad thing, depends on the situation. So this is a fairly strong sign that someone's attracted to you if they're responding quick constantly, especially if you're not necessarily texting them or responding to them quick. Number 19, they position themselves close to you, especially if there wasn't much of a logical reason for them to do that. So if they sit or stand near you, especially when it would have made more sense to sit or stand somewhere else. So for example, you might be on a bus and there's loads of seats available, but they choose one that's near you. And it doesn't make much sense, especially, again, even more strong if it's not like at the back, where some people might think, I just want to sit at the back or something like that. So if it seems quite clear that they chose it on purpose to be near you, then it's more of a strong signal. Number 19, they interrupt your conversations from nearby. So you're talking to some people, probably your friends, and they're nearby and they overhear or are purposely listening to what you're saying, and then they start to try and join in the conversation. This is some sign, that some level of evidence that they're attracted to someone in the group. So if they've shown prior signs before that they're attracted to you, then it's much more likely that they're attracted to you rather than someone else. Number 20, they laugh at your jokes. This is a bit more of a feminine oriented signal. So if you're telling jokes and they tend to be laughing at it, especially if you might think that one or two of them he said weren't even that funny, or he didn't even try to be funny, they were just laughing or giggling, then fairly strong sign they're attracted to you. Number 21, while walking past you, they turn towards you rather than away from you. Not really the strongest piece of evidence, but still valid. Number 22, while walking past you, again, but this time they brush against you. So they touch you as they move past. Might not be on purpose. So one thing to bear in mind to see if this is more or less of a strong signal, was there more space or not? Was it easier for them to avoid touching you and brushing past you or not? If it doesn't make much sense and it seems like they could have got past you easily without that happening, it's a stronger sign. Number 23, they say something to their friend and then they both giggle to each other. More of a feminine signal, this one. So yeah, try and be aware of this, especially if they have looked at you. So most commonly this will be, they look at you, they turn back to their friend, especially if they catch you noticing, and they say something, they're both giggling, and then they look again sometimes also. Number 24, they initiate conversations with you. So they might just like go up to you and talk to you, or they're nearby and they start a new conversation with you. This is a good sign that someone is interested in you in some way or another, not necessarily that they're attracted. But remember, like I said, a cluster of a few friendly signals, and in addition, the context of the situation is something where attraction might be somewhat likely, similar ages, both straight or whatever, male and female, or whatever variation. And then they are doing a bunch of signals like this, that can be a good sign. Remember, if you want to hold conversation easily and have more engaging conversations, not be nervous, check out our course on how to never run out of things to say in conversation after this. Number 25, you're in a group conversation and they're in the group and you're in the group and there's other people as well. So obviously that's a group more than 2 people. So in this situation, if they're being more loud and trying to draw more attention, or doing stuff that could potentially be them trying to draw more attention to themselves in that situation, especially if it's while you're there and not, they don't do it while you're not there. So this is a sign that they're trying to get you to engage with them and pay more attention to them as opposed to the other people, which is a sign that they find you attractive. Number 26, they ask for your name. So obviously this is less of a strong sign if you've just gone to university and you're going to be in the same class for a year. Then of course they're going to ask your name at some point. So this applies more if you're in a situation where there's not as much of a need to. So you're at like a house party or something and you're both going to leave in a few hours or something. You might never speak to each other again unless you exchange contact details. If they still ask for your name, it's an indication that they're interested in further communication with you after that conversation, and therefore potential sign that they're interested in you in some way, possibly attracted. Number 27, they ask for your age. This one I'd say is probably a bit stronger than your name, because this is the kind of statistic that some people use, sometimes in my opinion in a bit of a shallow way, but to an extent everyone wants to know in order to assess whether they're interested in pursuing something flirtatious with you or not. Number 28, they ask your height. So this is obviously going to be something that occurs more when you're texting, especially if you're a guy, because girls often look for guys who are of a certain height or above, sometimes in a bit of a superficial way, but also it's a genuine thing that people want to know. Fairly decent sign that they're interested in you to some extent, and they're checking that that aligns with their stats that they want to have and boxes to tick. Number 29, they ask what job you do, or if you don't have a job or you're not old enough to have a job, then it might be something along the lines of what you want to do, especially if you're at university, or your goals or ambitions or something like that. This is another signal they might be attracted to you, and it's also another one of those kind of box ticking things in some circumstances where they might be looking for someone who is or is not of a certain category of some kind. Number 30, they playfully try to challenge you. So they try to beat you in a debate, or they try to challenge you about something where they're sort of like doing teasing or banter or something like that, or even just like a task like, oh, I bet you can't, I don't know, do a backflip or whatever because he said he could do one earlier, or I bet you can't beat me at this game or something like that. Fair indicator, they're very attracted to you. Number 31, they compliment you. So a way to test if a compliment is flirtatious or not, this applies in both directions. So if you're reading a signal or you're wanting to give a signal and flirt. And by the way, if you feel like you're clueless about flirting, one of the first things that you should start trying to do is complimenting more. So if a compliment would sound gay if you said it to someone of the same sex, or if you're already in a situation where it's gay or there's 2 people of the same sex flirting, then literally just imagine the same thing said between 2 straight people and seeing if it sounds gay or not. So for example, if I said to someone, nice shoes, a guy, doesn't sound gay. If I said, your hair looks so pretty today, that now sounds gay, okay? So those are both compliments, but one of them clearly sounds a bit more like I'm hitting on them. So that's a good way to test if a compliment's flirtatious or not. If they're giving a compliment that's not flirtatious and just like, oh, you did well on your test or whatever, we can still see it as some evidence that they might be attracted to you, but it's not as strong. So obviously that wouldn't be, nearly everyone can see that what I just said, well done on your test because you passed the test, would not be on its own evidence to suggest that someone's attracted to you. But a cluster of a bunch of similar things can start to add up. One on its own, where it's clearly flirtatious, can be quite a lot stronger, and can even be to the extent where we might even take that one signal on its own in a very rare circumstance that I'd suggest doing that. Number 32, they punch you on the arm or hit you in a playful way, obviously softly, and if you're going to do this to someone else, obviously do it softly and don't whack them in the eye or something ridiculous. So usually this is something like, haha, you arsehole, or something like that, simple like that. So if I do that, I would say this again is more of a female oriented one. Seems like I've got a lot of these at the start, so sorry about that. There's some more masculine oriented ones coming up. But yeah, this is something that people do if they're flirting. Yeah, look out for it and see if you can use it yourself if you want to. Number 33, their leg is touching yours while sitting. So either you might be sitting side by side and your leg is like this and theirs is touching you. Obviously not lifted up like that necessarily. Or another one might be that you're sitting opposite and the legs are stretched out and your legs are touching. I would say that's a bit more of a stronger one because there's less reason for it to happen. The first one that I showed, especially if there's less space, could be just because that's how they're sitting, or because there's not enough space or something like that, or it's an accident, or maybe it's your fault for sitting with your legs further apart. But if there's less reason practically for it to be the case, as with all of these, we can consider it stronger evidence than when there's more of a plausible reason for it to exist otherwise. Number 34, they ask you if you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Similar to the one at the start that I said, where they talk about your boyfriend or girlfriend without knowing if you have one. This is usually just a less subtle way of doing that. So I'd class this as stronger evidence than the first one, although both of them are very strong evidence that they're attracted to you, in my opinion. Number 35, they come back if they could have left. So say, for example, you're in a nightclub and you're talking about, I'm just going to go and get a drink, and they do it and then they come back. When otherwise they could have gone back to their friends or gone somewhere else quite easily. That's quite a strong signal that they like you. Could also apply in other situations outside of a nightclub, obviously. Anytime when it's quite easy for them to leave if they wanted to, they choose not to. Number 36, they hold eye contact for a long time when they speak to you, especially after there's a silence. So with eye contact, we've got 4 different scenarios to think about. So you're talking, they're talking, there's a silence, you both finish talking, and you're not even in a conversation and someone's nearby you. And all group situations can have a few varying scenarios. But it's particularly in a situation where you're both talking, one-to-one especially, and then there's a silence, so you both finish talking, there's a silence, and if they keep looking at you for a while, then that's a good sign. Remember, again, that we want to see if this is a variation to their baseline behaviour. So if it suddenly changed recently based on something that's happened between you or in the environment, and even more so if they don't really do that to other people, but they're doing it to you, strong sign. Number 37, if it comes up that you like something, they suggest that they like it too, or they need someone to show them how to do it. This one happens to me quite a lot, because I do tons of martial arts. I've done martial arts since I was 6 years old. So when I mentioned that, a lot of the time, if a girl likes me, she'll say, oh, you should teach me martial arts sometime, something like that. In that case, even more strong, because she's proposing, perhaps not totally seriously, but still proposing that we should meet up at a separate time. Number 38, they look at you in a way that hides that they're looking at you. Usually this will be something like from the side, sort of like that. Or it could be, even if they're a bit more clever, they might be like shielding their face or something like that. Or for the geniuses out there, you can use a reflection to look at people. That's a strong one, that one. It's a good sneaky way to check someone out. But yeah, if they're doing something like that, then another sign they might be attracted to you. Also, additionally, if you catch them and then it's fairly certain that they noticed you catch them and then they react nervously or like look away fast or something like that, or on the opposite side of the spectrum, they smile and try to engage you. Both of those are even more evidence that they're attracted to you. Number 39, they suddenly say they're not going to have sex with you, even though you never talked about it. So obviously at this point, they're thinking about having sex with you, clearly. Number 40, generally talking about sex. So this can be something that happens just as part of a conversation. So this is stronger evidence if it wasn't really as relevant to what you were talking about just before, and they seemed to have jumped quite away from the previous topic to talk about sex, and even more so if they want to talk about it more and want to talk about what you or they enjoy with sex. So this is a sign that they're either testing to see how you feel about sex, or trying to make you think about it, or trying to get you two to talk about it together.